In the world of high fashion, people worship the designer who sketches the dress. They applaud the genius who chooses the silhouette, the cut, and the drape. But what the elite fashion world rarely acknowledges is that a silhouette is nothing without the science of the fabric. Before a dress can flow down a runway in Paris, a textile engineer has to spend thousands of hours in a laboratory manipulating polymers, breaking molecular bonds, and forcing raw chemistry to behave like art. I am not a fashion designer. I am a molecular architect. I spend my life engineering materials that shouldn't exist. I know exactly how much tension a single thread of carbon-infused silk can withstand before it violently snaps. I just never realized that the most fragile, volatile thread in my entire life was the woman I was married to. My name is Kieran. I'm 36 years old, and I am a lead textile engineer and smart fabric developer. 5 years ago, I married Isolde. Isolde was a high-powered public relations director for a luxury fashion conglomerate. She was stunning, hyper-ambitious, and addicted to the champagne-soaked exclusive world of elite fashion. She loved the VIP after-parties, the front-row seats, and the flash of the paparazzi cameras. I was the introverted scientist who preferred the absolute silence of my chemical laboratory. We were opposites, but I thought we were building an empire together. I provided the innovation, she provided the spotlight. For 4 agonizing years, I locked myself in my studio every night and every weekend, funding my research with every dime of my savings. I was developing my absolute magnum opus, the Aurora silk. It wasn't just a fabric. It was a proprietary, photoreactive smart polymer woven directly into organic silk. By adjusting ambient lighting, the fabric could seamlessly transition its color and pattern in real time, morphing like a liquid sunset. It was a technological holy grail that massive fashion conglomerates and athletic brands were spending tens of millions of dollars trying to invent. The patents alone were conservatively appraised at $20 million. I hand-sewed 5 flawless, bespoke prototype dresses using the Aurora silk. I promised Isolde that these dresses were our golden ticket. We would patent the formula, license it to a top-tier fashion house, and she would become the most powerful CEO in the industry. I gave her the keys to my kingdom. But Isolde didn't want to share the kingdom with a man in a lab coat. She looked at my chemical burns and my exhausted eyes, and she decided she wanted the millions and the glory. But she wanted to stand on the red carpet with someone else.
The corrosion of our marriage started when Isolde's PR firm signed a new flagship client, an ultra-luxury Parisian fashion house. The creative director of that house was a man named Laurent. Laurent was 42 years old and the absolute epitome of fashion industry toxicity. He wore custom velvet suits, draped himself in excessive jewelry, and spoke entirely in pretentious, empty buzzwords like sartorial disruption and aesthetic dominance. He hadn't actually designed a successful collection in 5 years. He was a fraud who survived by stealing ideas from young, desperate interns and claiming them as his own creative visions. Suddenly, Isolde was spending all her time flying to New York and Paris, claiming she was restructuring Laurent's global brand strategy. The red flags didn't just quietly appear, they bled through the fabric of our life. First, the profound, unapologetic disrespect. Isolde started actively belittling my life's work in front of her industry friends. "Kieran, you need to step out of the basement," she sighed one night, pouring herself a glass of expensive wine Laurent had gifted her. "Laurent controls the global culture. He commands the runways. You're just a glorified tailor playing with food coloring. You need to understand that the art is in the branding, not the sewing." Second, the intense, unnatural secrecy regarding her devices. Isolde, a woman who used to ask me to answer her texts while she was driving, suddenly changed her phone passcode to a complex alphanumeric string. She started taking phone calls in her car, sitting in the driveway with the engine running for 30 minutes before coming inside the house. Third, and by far the most terrifying, was her sudden, highly specific interest in my laboratory's environmental controls. Isolde, who absolutely loathed the smell of my studio, suddenly asked me where the fire suppression systems were located, and if the Aurora silk prototypes were kept in waterproof garment bags. When a fashion publicist suddenly cares about the waterproof rating of your storage vault, you don't answer the question. You run a deep-level security diagnostic.
When you invent a proprietary smart fabric worth potentially $20 million, you don't just leave it hanging in a closet. My laboratory was equipped with highly sensitive, motion-activated security cameras and environmental sensors linked directly to a private server. They were there to protect the chemistry, but they ended up protecting my life. One Saturday afternoon, while I was supposedly outsourcing industrial solvents, my phone vibrated with a critical priority alert from the lab. I pulled my car into a parking lot, opened my secure server app, and tapped into the live camera feed. It was Isolde and Laurent. They weren't just hooking up on my cutting table. They were actively unzipping the temperature-controlled garment bags, examining my 5 priceless Aurora silk dresses. Because the lab was perfectly quiet, the highly sensitive microphone picked up their conversation with crystal clarity. Laurent was running his hands over the shifting, glowing fabric, his voice shaking with pure greed. "This is it, Isolde. This is the Holy Grail. If I debut these 5 pieces as the finale of my Paris Fashion Week show next month, the fashion world will lose its mind. I'll have my corporate lawyers patent the photoreactive process under my brand the very next morning." Isolde laughed, a cold, cruel sound that made my blood run cold. Kieran is completely oblivious. Here is the timeline. When he leaves for his textile engineering conference in Seattle next weekend, we take the 5 dresses and the hard drive with his chemical notes. Before I leave, I'll smash the main water pipe in the ceiling. The lab will flood, ruining everything else. I'll tell him a pipe burst and the prototypes rotted. He'll be devastated. Laurent kissed her neck. And then? I serve him the divorce papers while he's crying over his wet fabric. Isolde sneered. He has no money, no lawyers, and no patent filings yet. He's just a sad little tailor, Laurent. He won't be able to fight a massive Parisian fashion house. We'll be royalty, baby. I sat alone in the sweltering cab of my car, staring at the glowing monitor as my entire reality shattered. My wife of 5 years was sleeping with a parasitic fraud. Together, they were actively plotting to steal 5 years of my blood, sweat, and genius, intentionally flood my laboratory, launch my masterpiece on the biggest stage in the world, and leave me completely destitute. They thought I was just a naive tailor. They didn't understand the level of absolute, unmitigated chemical destruction a master textile engineer is capable of synthesizing.
If you want to destroy a fashion house, you don't burn their sketches. You let them build the runway, invite the critics, seat the celebrities, and then you quietly unravel the threads. I didn't confront her. If I yelled and locked the lab, Laurent's army of corporate lawyers would bury me in injunctions, claim they had a verbal contract to the designs, and tie me up in court for a decade until I went bankrupt. I needed them to steal the dresses. I needed Laurent to proudly put his name on my masterpiece in front of the entire world. So I went to work in the chemistry lab. I took the true master chemical formulas, encrypted them, and moved them to an air-gapped hard drive that I locked in a secure bank vault. Then I turned my attention to the 5 physical dresses. The secret to the Aurora silk was a highly delicate macromolecular bond. It was incredibly stable under normal conditions, but I am a master chemist. I developed a specialized, invisible chemical sizing agent, a microscopic spray that bonded to the top layer of the silk. Under normal room lighting, sunlight, or standard photography flashes, the dresses would behave perfectly. They would glow, shift colors, and look like liquid magic. Laurent could rehearse with them, fit them on his models, and feel like an absolute god. But my chemical sizing agent was highly reactive to one specific catalyst: high-intensity, concentrated ultraviolet xenon strobe lights, the exact type of massive, blinding strobe lights that are exclusively used during the high-energy finale of major Paris runway shows. Once the fabric was blasted with that specific UV frequency for more than 10 seconds, the chemical bonds wouldn't just break, they would violently shatter. The silk would rapidly lose all its color, turning a dead, ashen gray. And worse, the structural integrity of the fabric would instantly degrade. It would turn brittle, like dry rot, and literally crumble into dust with the slightest movement. I sprayed the dresses.
I packed them beautifully back into their garment bags. I kissed Isolde goodbye on Thursday morning, told her I was going to Seattle, and watched her smile like she had just won the lottery. I let them steal the bomb. Now, they just had to put it on the runway.
I didn't go to Seattle. I flew straight to New York to meet with the most ruthless intellectual property litigator in the fashion and tech industry. I handed him my original, time-stamped chemical logs, the early fabric swatches, the official patent applications I had secretly expedited and secured in my own name a month prior, and the crystal-clear audio recordings of Isolde and Laurent explicitly conspiring to commit corporate theft. My lawyer smiled like a shark smelling blood in the water. "Kieran," he said, "using stolen, patented smart fabric technology to secure global investments and solicit buyers at Paris Fashion Week is massive, willful corporate fraud. He is lying to his investors and the press on a monumental scale." We drafted a massive federal lawsuit and a barrage of international cease and desist orders, but we didn't file them. We waited. Just as she promised, Isolde broke a water pipe in my lab before she left, causing a minor flood. She called me, fake crying about the lost dresses. I played the devastated husband perfectly. Meanwhile, Laurent and Isolde spent millions of dollars hyping up the greatest finale in fashion history. They bought massive billboards. They flew in elite fashion critics, celebrities, and global buyers. They were building a massive, glittering glass castle on the runway, and I was holding the only stone.
Saturday night, the grand finale of Paris Fashion Week. Over 1,000 elite guests were packed into the venue, and millions more were watching the live global stream. I sat in my dark hotel room, sipping a glass of bourbon, watching the stream in high definition. The music pounded, the crowd murmured in anticipation. Laurent's voice echoed over the PA system. And now I present the future of haute couture, the Aurora collection. The heavy curtains parted. 5 absolutely stunning supermodels walked onto the runway, wearing my 5 masterpiece dresses. The fabric glowed and shifted colors seamlessly as they walked. It was breathtaking. The fashion critics in the front row literally stood up, gasping at all. The flashing cameras were blinding. Backstage, the camera caught Laurent and Isolde hugging, weeping tears of joy, believing they had just secured a billion-dollar empire. The models reached the end of the runway and struck their final poses. Then, the finale lighting sequence engaged. The massive, high-intensity UV xenon strobe lights dropped from the ceiling, blasting the models with blinding, pulsating white light. I looked at the clock on my screen. 10 seconds. At exactly the 10-second mark, the chemical catalyst triggered. On the live global broadcast, right in front of Anna Wintour and the most ruthless fashion critics on Earth, the magic violently died. The glowing, shifting colors on all 5 dresses instantly drained away, snapping into a dull, ugly, concrete gray. A murmur of confusion rippled through the elite crowd. Laurent, watching from the monitors backstage, started screaming at his lighting directors, thinking it was a technical glitch. It wasn't a glitch. It was chemistry. As the models turned to walk back up the runway, the structural integrity of the fabric failed completely. With a sickening, dry tearing sound, the skirts of the dresses simply dissolved. The brittle, ruined silk literally crumbled into a cloud of gray dust and jagged threads. In a matter of 5 seconds, the multi-million-dollar masterpieces disintegrated right off the models' bodies. The top halves snapped, the seams gave way, and the heavy gray rags plummeted to the floor, leaving all 5 supermodels standing in the middle of the runway, wearing nothing but their nude-colored basic undergarments and a pile of gray dust around their ankles. The entire Grand Palais went dead, pin drop silent, and then absolute, apocalyptic chaos erupted. The fashion critics started shouting in sheer horror. The models, completely humiliated, covered themselves and ran off the runway in tears. The live camera zoomed in on Laurent, who had run out onto the stage, falling to his knees in the gray dust, his face purple with rage and panic, desperately trying to pick up the crumbled fabric. Isolde was standing behind him, her hands covering her mouth, her face the color of ash. I took a slow, deep sip of my bourbon, smiled at the chaotic, screaming live stream, and texted my lawyer, "Drop the hammer."
You cannot unshatter a mirror on the biggest runway in the world. The fallout was an absolute, unmitigated corporate massacre. The video of the dresses disintegrating went viral globally within 10 minutes. Fashion journalists called it the greatest, most humiliating disaster in the history of haute couture. But the real fatal blow happened on Monday morning. My lawyer formally served Laurent's fashion house and dissolved personally with a massive federal and international lawsuit for intellectual property theft, corporate espionage, and patent infringement. We publicly released the original patents and the audio recordings of them plotting to steal the designs. Because Laurent had lied to his corporate board and his massive investors about owning the technology, his fashion conglomerate stock price plummeted. The board of directors convened an emergency meeting that same night. They fired Laurent for cause, stripped him of all his stock options, and publicly threw him under the bus to save the brand. He was hit with massive lawsuits from his own shareholders, completely ruining him financially. Isolde's life was vaporized. Laurent, realizing he was facing prison for fraud, immediately blamed her, telling investigators that she was a rogue PR director who had supplied him with stolen, defective materials without his knowledge. She called me from a hotel room in Paris, sobbing so hard she was hyperventilating. Kieran, please. The investors are suing me. Laurent dumped me. The dresses turned to dust. You have to tell them you made a mistake with the chemistry. Please, I'll do anything. I didn't make a mistake, Isolde, I said calmly, leaning back in my chair. I gave you exactly what you stole. You just forgot to do your environmental stress tests. I read your messages, by the way. Good luck fighting the fashion houses. I hung up and blocked her number. During our divorce settlement, she had absolutely zero leverage. Because she was facing criminal charges for corporate espionage against me, the judge awarded me 100% of the marital assets and denied her any alimony. She walked away with millions in legal debt and a permanently ruined reputation.
It's been almost 3 years since that runway show in Paris. After the dust settled, Laurent's former conglomerate, desperate to settle my federal IP lawsuit and avoid total bankruptcy, paid me a $15 million out-of-court settlement. I kept 100% ownership of my chemical patents. A month later, a massive, highly respected global athletic brand bought the exclusive rights to the real, functioning, fully stable Aurora silk technology from me for $35 million. I took the money, bought my own state-of-the-art commercial laboratory, and I never have to answer to anyone ever again. Last I heard, Isolde avoided prison by taking a plea deal, but she is completely blacklisted from the fashion and PR industries globally. She is currently working at a fast fashion retail store in a suburban mall, folding cheap t-shirts, watching people walk past her, knowing she threw away a masterpiece for a cheap illusion. Laurent is completely bankrupt, buried in endless litigation, and permanently banned from working in haute couture. If there is a lesson to learn here, it's this. A beautiful design means absolutely nothing if the chemistry holding it together is corrupt. If your partner thinks they can use you as a stepping stone, steal your genius, and leave you to rot in the lab while they take the credit on the runway, don't panic. Don't fight them for the fabric. Smile, hand them the garment bags, and let them confidently launch your creation in front of the whole world. And right when they think they've won the spotlight, turn on the bright lights and watch their entire world turn to dust. Thanks for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this one, drop a like, hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments, what's the most satisfying wardrobe malfunction you've ever witnessed? Stay sharp, trust the science, and always stress test your materials.